Everything you think you know about the 4th of July is slightly wrong. They didn't vote for independence on the 4th. They didn't sign it on the 4th. And the most famous painting of the moment shows something that never happened. Every year, on the 4th of July, a nation celebrates its birth. Fireworks, parades. The date itself has become sacred. 1776, the 4th of July, the day America was born. But here is the strange truth. Almost everything most people believe about that day is slightly, fascinatingly wrong. This is the real story of the Declaration of Independence. Let's start with the biggest myth of all, the signing. Picture the famous scene. The Founding Fathers gathered in a grand hall, quill in hand, boldly signing the Declaration of Independence on the 4th of July, 1776. It did not happen that way. In fact, on the 4th of July, almost nobody signed anything. To understand why, we have to go back to the spring of 1776. The American colonies had already been at war with Britain for over a year. Blood had been spilled at Lexington and Concord. And yet, incredibly, most colonists still did not want full independence. They wanted their rights as Englishmen, not a total break from the crown. But the mood was shifting. A pamphlet called Common Sense, written by Thomas Paine, had swept through the colonies, arguing passionately that it was simple madness for a continent to be ruled by a distant island. It sold in staggering numbers and helped turn public opinion toward independence. And in the Continental Congress, gathered in Philadelphia, the radicals saw their moment. On June the 7th, a Virginia delegate named Richard Henry Lee rose and proposed the unthinkable, a formal resolution that the colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states. It was explosive, and Congress was not yet ready to vote on something so final. So they did two things. They postponed the vote for a few weeks to build support, and they appointed a committee of 5 men to draft a statement, just in case, explaining to the world why the colonies were breaking away. That committee included Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, and a quiet, red-haired 33-year-old from Virginia with a gift for writing, Thomas Jefferson. The others insisted Jefferson write the draft. And so, alone in a rented room on the 2nd floor of a Philadelphia house, over about 17 days in June, Jefferson wrote the words that would echo for centuries. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But here is something history often forgets. Jefferson's original draft contained a passage furiously condemning the slave trade, attacking the British king for enabling it. And it was cut. Delegates from the southern colonies, whose economies depended on slavery, would not accept it. To keep the fragile unity of the colonies together, the passage was struck out. The contradiction at the heart of the new nation, a document proclaiming that all men are created equal, written in a land of slavery, was there from the very first day. Now to the dates. This is where the myth unravels completely. On July the 2nd, 1776, not the 4th, the Continental Congress actually voted for independence. 12 colonies voted yes. The deed was done on the 2nd. John Adams was so certain of it that he wrote to his wife Abigail, predicting that the 2nd of July would be celebrated by future generations as the great anniversary festival, with fireworks and parades, forever. He was right about the celebration. He was just 2 days off on the date, because it was not until July the 4th that Congress finished editing and formally adopted the final wording of the Declaration itself. That is the date they printed at the top, and that is the date that stuck. But they didn't sign it that day. On the 4th, The document was rushed to a printer named John Dunlap, who worked through the night producing copies to be read aloud across the colonies. These first printed copies bore only two names: John Hancock, the President of Congress, and the Secretary. The famous signed version, the one on parchment, with all those signatures, did not even exist yet. It wasn't ordered until weeks later, and most of the delegates did not sign it until August the 2nd, 1776, a full month after the 4th. Some signed even later than that. A few who voted for independence never signed at all, and the last signature may not have been added until the following year. And that famous painting, the one of the founders gathered around presenting the Declaration, which hangs in the U.S. Capitol and appeared on the back of the $2 bill, it does not show the signing at all. It shows the drafting committee presenting their work back in June, a moment months before the signing that everyone imagines. So why do we celebrate the 4th? Because the 4th is the date on the document. It's the date the words became official, the day the ideas, not the ink, were born. And what ideas they were. When George Washington had the Declaration read aloud to his troops in New York on July the 9th, the soldiers were so electrified that a crowd tore down a statue of King George III and melted it into musket balls to fire back at his army. The Declaration was, at first, dismissed by Britain as the ranting of a few disgruntled colonists. But it became something far greater. One of the most influential documents ever written, a statement of human rights and human dignity that would inspire revolutions and oppressed peoples across the entire world for centuries to come. Its promise that all are created equal was not yet true when it was written. Not for the enslaved, not for women, not for the native peoples of the land, but the promise was made in ink for all the world to read. And ever since, the long, painful, unfinished story of America has been the struggle to make those words, written on a hot July day in 1776, finally, fully true. If you want more stories, History Forgot, subscribe to Time Arc Stories. A new one drops every day.